What happens when your peaceful flight turns into a showdown with a self-proclaimed queen of the skies? Buckle up for a turbulence of entitlement and unexpected laughter. Before we begin today's insane story, show some love if you've ever survived a wild Karen meltdown. Drop a like and let me know your craziest Karen run-in you've had down in the comments. The vibrant buzz of the airport terminal enveloped me like a warm embrace as I exited the plane. Around me, folks were buzzing, fueled by adrenaline and the remnants of our collective disbelief at the Karen show. Stepping off the aircraft was like leaving the theater after a blockbuster premiere. Everyone was abuzz with opinions, critiques, and delightful incredulity. I can't believe that woman thought she could hold an entire flight hostage over a seating dispute, a tall man in sandals said, shaking his head while grinning as if he had just returned from a roller coaster ride. His laughter was infectious, igniting a chain reaction of chuckles in the crowd, and I reveled in the camaraderie of our shared absurd adventure, feeling a hilariously absurd kinship with my fellow travelers. As I strolled through the terminal, my mind began to whirl with the idea of capturing this insanity online. I pulled out my phone and opened my social media app, the screen lighting up with a bright eagerness that matched my enthusiasm. I started typing furiously. So I just survived a flight involving the Karen. You won't believe how it all went down? Picture this. She thought the world owed her prime seating. And then, oh boy, the flight attendants took no prisoners. My fingers danced across the screen as I channeled my inner storyteller, making sure the ridiculous details flowed seamlessly. Comments flashed on my screen, a wave of support streaming in. I could hardly wait to share my epic saga with the digital world, striking back against the entitled behavior that seems to overstay its welcome like the last guest at a party. Moments passed, and I hit post, almost ceremoniously, watching the likes and shares trickle in as if they were reluctant raves, slowly finding their courage. It was as if my social media had transformed into a virtual stadium, cheering me on as I recounted every victorious moment of my encounter with Karen. Epic win, one comment read, accompanied by a flood of animated emojis. This is the content I didn't know I needed, said another, and I couldn't help but lean into the sensation of pure delight. Suddenly, I was the underdog who stood up to the mighty giant, and collectively my followers were amplifying this fairy tale of triumph. Who knew that social media could turn into a digital weapon of both levity and liberation? Just as the buzz of approval washed over me, I spotted Liam sauntering over, still sporting that playful grin that promised an arsenal of sarcasm. Ah, the glorious pen of the hero. What epic tales are you weaving now, O bard of the traveling saga? He teased, leaning against the wall in that relaxed way I always envied. I recounted the highlights, the outlandish antics of the Karen, her refusal to exit the plane, and importantly, the glee I felt witnessing the airline crew rise to the occasion. Liam chuckled heartily. You should submit this saga to a reality show. I bet they'd have a full season dedicated to real-time Karens caught in the act. With that thought bouncing around in my mind, I saw an unexpected subgroup of fans forming nearby, those passengers who had shared my flight and had been laughing along with us. I soon found myself engulfed in a mini reunion of sorts as fellow passengers joined our spontaneous circle. The drama of Karen's rant had morphed into a light-hearted coffee clatch where we traded stories of other ludicrous encounters with entitled figures who thought the world was theirs to command. Someone chimed in with their saga of a Karen at the car rental desk who had threatened to cancel her 5-star membership due to the car type not meeting her dubious specifications. Everyone erupted in laughter as we found comical familiarity in each other's misadventures, armed with the realization that we had united under a battle cry of common civility facing absurd selfishness. The entire scene felt surreal. Here we were, united by shared trauma, all grateful to find humor in our collective experiences, as we bonded over an epic saga of Karens. As I glanced down at my notification feed, I realized my earlier post had gone virally spectacular. Likes were pouring in like a sanguine waterfall, and comments offered praise and additional stories that began to click into a brilliant tapestry of humor and accountability. Just as I was about to respond to one particularly witty commenter, my phone vibrated intensely, A direct message from an influential travel blog offering to feature my story in their next issue. Oh, sweet justice. I practically squealed, reveling in the idea of sharing my hilarious misadventure with a multitude of passionate readers looking for the same dose of catharsis. Was this the possibly impending end of Karen encounters on flights, or merely the ignition of many tales left untold? Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure out of the corner of my eye. Karen, still nursing her indignation, was attempting a dramatic exit from the terminal, clad in her tailored blazer that could have been woven from the threads of her own delusions of grandeur. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight. Did she honestly think the airport was a catwalk for her entitled theatrics? There was a definite air of disbelief in the atmosphere as we shared knowing glances. It was as if a collective thought lingered that this wouldn't be the last we'd hear of Karen, the unintentional queen of viral content, and honestly, I felt a surge of exhilaration at the prospect. After all, what would life be without these absurd moments that brought us together in laughter? Summoning the courage and curiosity that had been awakened within me, I turned to Liam and said, "Let's follow her just for a moment. Who knows what ludicrous mischief she's heading towards next?" With that comedic spark igniting in our eyes, we ventured forth in pursuit, driven by an unquenchable need to capture this story as it unfolded. After all, in a world full of Karens, we had duty to document the chaos surrounding us, perhaps even contributing to the ever-growing legend of the Karen Chronicles. What escapade lay waiting, begging to be explored next? As I perched in my precious window seat, the plane's interior buzzed with routine boarding activity. My coffee wafted its aromatic glory, a comforting companion amidst the chaos. Then came Karen, marching down the narrow aisle with an air of entitlement that could rival a dictator's. Seriously, how does one woman wield so much command without any real power? She stopped at my seat, and the instant freeze frame of her oversized sunglasses and designer handbag clasped tightly under one arm created an image that screamed, "I'm about to make your morning more entertaining than that in-flight movie you've already seen." I could feel my smile falter as she huffed out her first demand, right next to my seat. Of course, the ultimate plot twist of an economy-class horror story. Seriously, I thought, eyes wide in disbelief as she leaned closer into my personal space, waving her hand dismissively like I was a lingering mosquito bothering Her Highness. "Can you just switch with me? I can't handle the claustrophobia by the window." The word claustrophobia dripped from her lips with the dramatic flair of a Shakespearean actress. It was such a melodramatic request, I half expected a spotlight to shine down on her mid-flight. The seatbelt sign hadn't even been switched on yet, and we were already on the verge of a full-blown melodrama that would put daytime TV to shame. With every ounce of my laid-back heart, I refused, a kaleidoscope of panic and amusement swirling inside me. A window view was the least I could expect for my Miami adventure. She switched tactics right there and then, and suddenly, I wasn't just a seatmate anymore. I was her archenemy. "You've threatened my child," she exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger, and I could almost hear the dramatic music swell in the background. "Look, lady, your child," who I later learned was blissfully snoring in the aisle seat, was not threatened in any manner. Nor was there a child at risk of imminent danger. I blurted out as calmly as I could manage, my patience teetering on a knife edge. My fellow passengers exchanged glances. Some were amused, others horrified. But everyone's eyes bore witness to the absurdity of this high-altitude tattletale. How dare she twist a simple request into an accusation worthy of a soap opera? Liam, my ever-supportive friend who had taken the aisle seat in the name of camaraderie and snacks, jumped in with lightning speed. "Ethan didn't even get close to your kid," he exclaimed, gesturing wildly. "Your precious child is safe in the land of aisle seats, where all snack vendors live peacefully. I promise the only thing threatened here is your dignity." The man behind me chuckled, and I couldn't help but stifle a laugh, picturing the chaotic glitterati of airplane etiquette crumbling before our eyes. Karen, on the other hand, mustered the sharpest glare known to man, and I braced myself for a tirade that could rival the best of villainous speeches. Even the flight attendants were caught in this swirling vortex of chaos. Two of them sidled over, their expressions oscillating between confusion and suppressed laughter. "Ma'am, Let's keep the peace, okay? One of them suggested with surprising tact, while Liam winked at me, clearly relishing the absurdity. Meanwhile, Karen grew more animated, insisting I was a danger to all passengers on board. Was my mere presence enough to send shockwaves of fear through the lovely cabin of Flight 342? I felt like an unwitting contestant in a bizarre game show called Who Will Get Blacklisted First? As this spectacle unfolded, I couldn't help but muse about the coffee shop saga that led me here. Was it a mistake to choose this flight? Had the universe aligned in such a way that I would bear witness to such utter nonsense? Perhaps there should be a reality show on these flying dramas, and right then and there, I could lead a spectacular season finale. I pictured myself donning a fake mustache and announcing myself as the flight intimidator. And maybe I'd even record a TikTok by the end of it all, fueled by the energy of an absurd encounter, and topped off with a healthy drizzle of sarcasm. Suddenly, the idea of being blacklisted didn't seem so dreadful after all. Perhaps it was my ticket to quirky fame. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, I felt an odd sense of triumph wash over me. I had stood my ground, remained calm, and let the comedic universe spiral into an absurd scene I would recount for years to come. But then, without warning, Karen shifted gears once again. She reached for her phone, and with a flourish reminiscent of a magician revealing their grand finale, proclaimed loudly, "I'm filing a complaint." Oh boy, here we go. This saga was far from over, and with the flight creeping towards departure, I braced myself. After all, who would ever think an ordinary Tuesday flight could morph into an epic showdown of humor and entitlement? What was she going to tell her friends on the ground? Did she really believe anyone would believe her? As the engines roared to life, shaking the cabin slightly, Karen's rant echoed in the confined space, like a poorly timed alarm clock that wouldn't stop ringing. "I will not tolerate being treated like this," she barked. The flight attendants seemed to cast each other glances as if playing a game of poker, trying to gauge how far this wild card would go. Meanwhile, the passengers around us involuntarily clutched their armrests, while I struggled to suppress the urge to burst out laughing as I watched her transform into a one-woman show no one asked for. Did I just pay for prime seating in row 11 for a riveting performance on the inconsistencies of airline policies? This was turning into a classic flight of fancy, one that I could narrate with dramatic flair for my TikTok followers later. Oh, please, just grab the mic and announce intermission already, I thought, stifling a laugh when Liam leaned over to me whispering, "Her child is probably sleeping through this Oscar-worthy display. Should we get popcorn?" Ugh, the absurdity. Why had I ever thought this escape to Miami would be low-key? Instead, I was seated next to a real-life Karen, someone who radiated an energy that could light up a small city. The absurdity was delightful. I couldn't help but imagine the headlines. "Local man survives tangled with flight Karen," while dining on pretzels and Coke. My heart raced, not just from nervous anticipation, but from the sheer thrill of knowing that this story was going to be one for the ages. How could I ever convey this to anyone who was not on this flight? Note to self, I muttered under my breath, "Bring a voice recorder next time." Just then the flight attendant stepped in, her face a blend of poised professionalism and an eyebrow slightly raised in disbelief. "Ma'am, would you like us to help you find another seat?" she offered soothingly, clearly exhausted from the running circus unfolding around us. Thank goodness for her, because I'd lost track of how this bonkers episode could escalate further, with Karen now shooting daggers from her eyes. If I wanted to sit in a tin can filled with your kind of negativity, I'd have booked a seat next to the lavatory, Karen barked. Bless that attendant's heart. She didn't even bat an eye at the audacity, which only fueled the fire in Karen's indignation. A hush fell over the cabin as it began to sink in. What folly had we all been sucked into? Midway through Karen's next empowering soliloquy about parenthood and her rights as a mother, an announcement crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience as we review some footage regarding the situation." I swear I could feel the air thicken with tension. I half expected a tribunal to unfold right there in row 11. During my initial panic mode, I grasped at the plastic armrests as if they were life preservers. My own heart raced. Did I just find myself at the center of an impromptu courtroom drama at 30 feet? Liam, who had been watching this spectacle with increasing amusement, chimed in, "Don't worry, buddy. If it goes down, just lawyer up." The cabin filled with giggles and murmurs as everyone tried to catch snippets of Karen's melodramatic tales. I began to wonder how I might play my cards right and flip this situation to my advantage. Ideas danced through my brain like fireflies in the dark. Maybe I could use this moment to get her blacklisted for good. Yes. This was my chance to refine her entitled mania into a real case study on flight etiquette. I envisioned myself in front of a glamorous panel, sharing my experience and detailing Karen's behavior like I was writing an exposé. Who knew airplane rides could produce such absolute ridiculousness? I chuckled quietly to myself, imagining the spark of inspiration illuminating my TikTok feed while portraying the Shakespearean tragedy of Karen the Terrible. The wait felt both eternal and instantaneous, every second stretching as I braced for the aftermath of this unfolding drama. It was surreal how my mundane flight transformed into a thrilling ride of highs and lows, with Karen's antics paving the way for me. Finally, the chief flight attendant returned, her face remarkably stoic. "Now we've reviewed the footage and determined that there was no threat," she said firmly, directing her gaze at Karen. "Ethan here simply occupied his seat and asked you to respect his space." It was as if someone had hit the pause button on every chaotic moment of the flight. Karen's face turned a remarkable shade of crimson, the sudden denial of her victimhood snapping her reality into stark clarity. With an ear-splitting silence enveloping the cabin, one could hear a pin drop. Was that a win for sanity? A collective gasp spread through the aisles like wildfire after a few moments, and I dared to peek at my fellow travelers. Some were glaring at Karen as if they had just escaped a horror movie alive without knowing how they did it. I couldn't help but smirk triumphantly at the air of realization washing over the cabin. Mission accomplished. Her reign of entitlement was being dethroned right before our eyes. Yet, just as I relished my small victory, Karen, ever the stubborn tempest, drew herself up and announced, "I will have you all know that none of this is over. I still have rights. I am a paying customer." As I sat absorbing the absurdity, Liam leaned over, exuberantly whispering, "Maybe next time she'll at least think twice before trying to command the skies." The chaotic energy rippled around us, giving a collective buoyancy to the passengers as Karen squirmed in her seat, sliding deeper into denial. Unbelievable. I couldn't shake the look of her still maintaining that defensive posture, as if fortress walls would become her gilded throne against all reason. But this unexpected turn was not just an escape from the ordinary. It was a reminder. I was here, one man amongst many in a plane that wouldn't soon forget Karen's epic collapse into entitlement. Who would have thought that this uneventful Tuesday flight could become the story of my life? The skies were turning wild with laughter, and I wasn't about to miss it. As I sat there soaking in the triumphant moment, the atmosphere on the plane shifted. The energy around us had transformed from dread to delight. People began to giggle, and laughter rolled through the aisles like a warm summer breeze. This was no ordinary flight. It was the birthplace of a legendary saga, the flight of the Karen. I suddenly felt like a gladiator basking in the glow of newfound fame. My heart raced not just out of relief, but exhilaration. Was I really about to become a viral sensation for simply wanting to sit in peace? I could practically see the animated headlines flashing across my mind. Local guy redefines air travel etiquette, lands in viral infamy. Suddenly, I was no longer just Ethan. I was the hero of my own unfolding drama. But my moment of glory was short-lived because Karen, fueled by indignation, wasn't done causing a scene. "You will all regret this," she hissed, her voice slicing through the bubbly atmosphere like a spatula through warm butter. "I have connections. You haven't seen the last of me." With every syllable, she turned a deeper shade of maroon, her fury bubbling over like lava from a volcano about to explode. I could almost hear her visualizing a world where her entitlement was the reigning monarch, an idea so ridiculous it almost compelled me to laugh out loud. Picture this: a press conference following her illustrious return to the skies, complete with dramatic music and a podium that glimmered while she ranted about her flight rights. Did she actually think anyone would care enough to rally around her? Liam leaned back in his seat, a grin plastered across his face, clearly relishing the absurdity of her threats. What's her end game here? Is she planning some sort of airport revolt? He quipped, chuckling under his breath, His laughter was infectious. Passengers were quickly joining in, reveling in the communal delight of Karen's reckless bravado. The kaleidoscope of human expression around me swung from disbelief to hilarity, and what was once a tense situation morphed into a mini comedy club in the air. I couldn't help but picture myself in the limelight, standing on a stage addressing a cheering crowd while embellishing the tale of Karen the Terrifying. I could completely see myself gesticulating wildly, mimicking her over-the-top rants that even Shakespeare would find epic. Oh, the joy of dramatic reenactments. Just then, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom again, interrupting our laughter. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are approaching our next stop, and for your safety, we will be asking Miss Jacobs to disembark. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath echo through the aircraft, the air thick with anticipation. It was as if the entire plane was holding its breath, waiting to see how this buffoonery would play out. I stole a glance at Karen, who had paused mid-tirade, her face frozen in disbelief, as the reality of her impending ejection sank in. Would the woman who tried to weaponize the rules of airline travel concede defeat? Hilariously enough, she seemed to be grappling with the harsh truth in a way that only a true diva could. Why do entitled people act as if the universe owes them an endless supply of rights that no one else enjoys? To my utter amusement, as the plane began to descend, Karen stood up, arms flailing dramatically. "I demand to speak to the manager. This is unacceptable. I have rights," she hollered, but her words only prompted more laughter among the passengers. I can't believe this spectacle was unfolding before my eyes. It was like a slow-motion movie scene, where the protagonist, aka me, was finally getting the recognition for simply existing while Karen self-destructed. It was phenomenal entertainment and a perfect reminder of what an entitled tantrum could look like on a plane. I glanced around me, catching the eye of a lady a few seats back, who winked and held up her phone, already recording this circus for posterity. Ah, tech-savvy passengers, truly the unsung heroes of today. As the plane hit the tarmac and rolled to a stop, the atmosphere shifted once again. Excitement buzzed as people packed their bags, eager to exit and absorb the juicy gossip that awaited them. Passengers began to stand and move toward the exits, whispering and giggling about Karen. I could practically feel the rush of adrenaline from the impending tale-telling that would surely take place beyond this cabin. Liam nudged my arm. "Dude, you need to get her debrief on tape like right now. Your followers are going to eat this up." My mind was racing faster than the plane's landing speed. I found myself torn between taking a quiet exit and capturing the essence of this madness. Could I possibly seize this moment as a TikTok-worthy masterpiece? But just as I was about to leap into social media savvy mode, I realized, no, this wasn't about public notoriety. It was about savoring the taste of cosmic justice. Karen was going to be blacklisted, an aircraft leper, destined to serve penance for her ludicrous antics. Suddenly, this felt bigger than the occasional chuckle in a digital space. I had a hand in rectifying her overachieving entitlement in real life. I smiled to myself, feeling an odd sense of pride and victory. The quirky, conflict-loving Ethan had entered a showdown mid-air and managed to not just survive, but thrive in the absurdity of the moment. It was a reminder to cherish the ridiculous and embrace the unexpected. As I stepped off the plane, a new adventure loomed ahead, leaving me to wonder about the wild tales the universe still had in store for me. As the plane finally rolled to a halt, I felt an electric rush of relief and exhilaration mingle within me. Karen, now a caricature of fury, continued to berate the flight staff, her high-pitched voice echoing off the cabin walls like a banshee lamenting her sudden downfall. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Once just a mere passenger, I had now morphed into a reluctant gladiator, having faced the fierce lioness of entitlement known as Karen. With each rant, she hurled towards the beleaguered crew. I felt the weight of collective glee from my fellow passengers. It felt as if we were all participants in an epic sitcom, the kind where the over-the-top drama teetered on the edge of hilarity. The atmosphere buzzed like caffeinated bees, and not a single person was ready to let this moment of triumph slip by unnoticed. Liam poked me with a playful elbow. "So, what's your next move, O champion of air travel? A celebratory dance?" he teased, his eyes glinting mischievously as he nestled deeper into his seat, preparing for the show. My mind buzzed with possible responses. I could take a bow or craft an Oscar-worthy acceptance speech, but I opted to just soak up the ludicrous nature of the whole situation. Watching the flight attendants maintain their professionalism while juggling Karen's indignation was enough material to write an entire sitcom season. I marveled at their composure, thinking they must have been through this many times before. I could practically hear them whispering strategies in hushed tones. Calm the dragon, navigate the storm, watch for fire-breathing outbursts. The concept of flight attendants as warrior peacekeepers was too good to ignore. Then, as if on cue from the universe's comedic director, Karen, having run out of steam on her ranting tirade, decided to metaphorically throw another tantrum. "My lawyer is going to have a field day. This is an outrage," she yelled one last time, planting her feet firmly and crossing her arms in a display that screamed, "I'm not going anywhere!" It was the epitome of comedic timing, a classic Karen move to make herself the center of attention even as her flight exit loomed large. I suppressed a chuckle and glanced at the amused faces around me. Some were filming, others had their phones poised, ready to capture her final performance in the theater of the absurd. It was practically a live performance of the latest viral internet sensation, complete with a dramatic plot twist and an imminent climax. With the plane doors finally opening, we were met with the bustling dock, brimming with the sounds of passengers disembarking and the cacophony of their chatter. It was only a matter of moments before Karen's fate would solidify into flight history. I leaned forward, attempting to spot the airline staff climbing aboard to pronounce Karen officially grounded. My heart raced as I envisioned her eventual confrontation with the crew. Was there going to be a pen and paper involved for her complaint? Or was she about to descend into the dark waters of appealing to corporate? In the midst of all the commotion, I couldn't help smirking, feeling like a mischievous schoolboy preparing to unveil the frosted cake at the school fair. Watch and learn, Karen. You're about to be the talk of every airport lounge in the nation. As the flight attendants entered, their expressions spoke volumes, a mixture of irritation and resolve that was almost poetic. They approached Karen with paperwork in hand, as though bearing the symbolic sword of justice, and began chatting animatedly, the tone shifting from one of concern to unmistakable authority. I hung on to every word, practically giddy with anticipation. The surrounding passengers, sensing a delightful conclusion to this drama, leaned in, their faces brimming with amusement and schadenfreude. "She's getting blacklisted, isn't she?" "Finally!" someone exclaimed. I'd never seen so many inflatable popcorn bags pop up in the minds of witnesses, and I was ready to listen to the tales that would flow after this theatrical production reached its finale. As I navigated my way toward the aisle, eager to join in on the whispering mayhem that was sure to ensue after the great Karen incident, a feeling of camaraderie erupted among fellow travelers. After weeks of jet-lagged orbiting in each other's spaces, we were now bound by an unspoken promise of shared laughter and mutual understanding that this particular in-flight experience had become something monumental. I sauntered toward the front with a grin, ready to bask in the glory of not being the main event yet still living the thrilling aftermath of this whirlwind performance. The sense of belonging to this perfectly flawed human experience bubbled up within me, spilling out in spontaneous bursts of laughter as we discussed what we would tell our friends and families about the flight of the Karen. As I exited the plane, a woman in a floral dress beside me caught my eye. "I've never seen anything like that. Do you think the world has seen the last of her?" she asked, barely suppressing laughter. I shrugged theatrically and raised an eyebrow. "In this age of social media, she'll be back for a sequel. Broadway might even come knocking." My words slipped out like silly putty against a sticky table, leaving all of us giggling at the absurdity that the age of entitlement brought with it far more comedy than we ever anticipated. Little did I know that this was merely the beginning of my exaggerated tales and brushes with Karen-esque figures. Would they become my involuntary partners in crime, or merely more misguided souls in the grand theater of life? Only time would tell. Thanks for tuning into this insane entitled Karen story. If you're craving more wild Karen showdowns, check out our video on the right. Or if you trust YouTube's instincts, pick the one on the left. Whichever you choose, brace yourself. There's plenty more meltdown madness where today's story came from.